What's going on, everyone? So Chris Paul to the Lakers has been heavily rumored ever since the reports came out that the Phoenix Suns are very likely to waive, maybe even potentially stretch Chris Paul's contract. Now, before we dive into the new reports that have came out, Chris Paul did say that, he wants to be in Phoenix. That's why he's here. That's why he went there. But you got to keep in mind that's also showing face, right? Like, what is he supposed to say? No, F the Phoenix Suns. I don't want to be here. They need to trade me now. Like, no, you got to remember, this is a guy that was like the president of the Players Association at one point, and a guy that understands the ins and outs and all the politics and stuff that go into the NBA. He's not going to, badmouth and trash the Phoenix Suns or say, no, I want out. I want to get out of this situation or anything like that. Or, we've already had these conversations. No, he's doing what all players do, and even organizations do. How many times have we heard teams say, oh, like, I'm never going to, this guy's a lifer, and then all of a sudden, boom, that's it, he's done, right? Next thing you know, he's traded. I mean, even DeMar DeRozan, right? You had the Toronto Raptors come out and say, oh, DeMar DeRozan, we want him to retire a Raptor, and then like 3 days later, they traded him for Kawhi Leonard. Now, granted, they won a chip and it was worth it, but still, it all goes into the play. But we're getting reports that the Lakers are heavily interested in bringing in Chris Paul and kind of rounding out that backcourt of point guard play and just guard play, period. They also, based on the new reports, are interested in not only bringing in Chris Paul, but keeping D'Angelo Russell and kind of having that with him, D'Lo, Reeves, and just kind of really lock in and solidify that backcourt. Now, that sounds great and all, and I wouldn't mind that at all. Chris Paul, D'Lo, Austin Reeves, like, that's one of the better backcourts in the entire league. Defensively, it's a little rough because Chris Paul isn't the defender that he once was. D'Lo basically is non-existent defensively, but he does have the tools to be good defensively. And then Austin Reeves is a solid defender. He's not like elite or anything like that, but he is a good enough defender to hold his own. But my biggest concern is not even so much the defensive end. I do love the idea of, Chris Paul, D'Lo, and Reeves because, D'Lo can play on the ball. He was great off the ball, so you could play him alongside Chris Paul. But who comes off the bench would be the problem, right? Now, some matchups, not all matchups, some matchups, you could do maybe Austin Reeves at the 3, like if you're going up against a team that has like a smaller, small forward, or a small forward that's kind of just like tucked in the corner shooting threes all game, that kind of thing, then you could probably get away with Austin Reeves in those matchups at the 3, but that's kind of few and far between. Very likely, you're probably moving Austin Reeves off the bench. Now, ideally, in a perfect world, Chris Paul says, hey, I'll come to Lakers. I just want to win a chip. I'm more than happy to come off the bench. If that happens, then perfect. Because Chris Paul, as your backup point guard, would probably be one of the best values ever. Like, he might be one of the best backup point guards in NBA history. Like, if you have him coming up and backing up. Problem is, will his ego and things like that allow him to do that? D'Angelo Russell, he didn't really like the idea of coming off the bench. He kind of just bit his tongue and did it because he was playing so badly. But even he expressed, when all was said and done, how he felt about having to sit and come off the bench and didn't really like the idea. Austin Reeves is probably the guy that would come off the bench just because, one, Reeves spent a majority of the season off the bench. I also think that you could probably get him to understand, like, hey, dude, you earned the starting spot. You deserve to start. You will be the starter for the foreseeable future. We just paid you. You just got your bag. We need you to come off the bench. We need you to be the point guard off the bench. We'll give you more point guard duties, whatever. But you're going to have to come off the bench for us. I actually think Austin Reeves would make that sacrifice. Look, Austin Reeves got his bag. He's coming in. I don't think he cares. As long he'll get his minutes regardless, because Chris Paul isn't going to be playing 30 to 40 minutes per game. Chris Paul will probably be playing 25 minutes per game, so Reeves will probably get his 30 minutes and kind of split as the primary guard backup next to D'Lo and Chris Paul. So I think that would be the best approach. I think that would be the approach that would kind of calm all egos, so to speak. And then you kind of just, okay, our starting backcourt is Chris Paul, D'Lo. Probably at that point have to go Jared Vanderbilt at the three, and then you kind of have your bench of Austin Reeves. If you bring back Dennis Schroeder, maybe you could go Dennis Schroeder and then just have Reeves solely be the two. But I just feel like you'd have a lot of conflict. Like you probably have to run a lot of 3 guard lineups, which certain matchups, sure, but not majority of matchups. So at that point, you're probably letting Schroeder go. If you were to trade D'Lo, I wouldn't mind you keeping Schroeder, right? So like if they signed Chris Paul and they ended up trading D'Lo for whatever, then by all means bring Dennis Schroeder back, right? Because that makes a lot of sense. But if you're gonna go the route of like keeping D'Lo, signing Chris Paul, and bringing and still paying Austin Reeves, then at that point you basically got your 3 rotated backcourt guards. Got guys like Max Christie that could play the 2. You got, if you keep like a Troy Brown or whatever, or whoever you get in free agency, you got options outside of just those 3 guys. So I'd rather go that approach and then just kind of have that. Bring Reeves off the bench. You have Reeves, Max Christie, Rui Hachimura, and then whoever else you decide to keep for the long haul, or whoever you sign in free agency. I don't hate the backcourt, right? D'Lo would be very good for the regular season, right? Because he was very good for the Lakers during the regular season. Shot 50% from the field, 43% from 3. Guy that just night in, night out, give you 17 and 6 a game. Like, that has a lot of value. He could play heavy minutes. He's young. You could kind of run different sets and different looks. He can also play off the ball really well, as we saw with LeBron James. So that would help a lot. And, D'Lo kind of carries the heavy load during the regular season, and then Chris Paul, you keep him fresh, you keep him healthy, so that way come playoffs, he can kind of handle like the crunch time and like the big moments throughout the course of the playoffs. That could be something of value. There are some questions and concerns about Chris Paul as far as like his playoff performances go, but the difference between past Chris Paul experiences and an experience with Chris Paul and the Lakers would be Chris Paul wouldn't be the 1 or 2 guy, right? Like, every team he's been on, he's basically been the guy or the number 2 guy. Like, think of the Phoenix Suns, right? It was him and Devin Booker. And then, when he played in Houston, it was like him and James Harden. So he's always been the 1A, 1B type guy. Where on the Lakers, he would be the, at best, 3rd option, but realistically, he'd probably be the 4th, maybe even 5th option. So it wouldn't be so much about him scoring, and having to go and drop 30 a game. It would just be like, hey, dude, can you give us 10 and 10 a game, right? And kind of play like that Rondo role, where Rondo was kind of just the playmaker. He could go off and give you 15, but really, he was just giving you and providing, 8 and 8 a game. Right? That's what you'd be looking for with Chris Paul, a guy that's not going to turn the ball over, that's been in moments, that, understands the ins and outs. That's what you'd be looking for. So I don't hate the idea of these two. Again, defensively, it would be a real concern. If you get Chris Paul, it makes more sense to take D'Lo and try to flip him into a bigger need, right? Like, can you go get like a Miles Turner? Something like that, or like some, a guy with some size or something like that could be nice, or maybe get some shooting, or a quality perimeter player. Like, I'm just throwing a name out there, not saying he'd even be gettable, but like a guy like a Jeremy Grant, something like that, like a legit 3-and-D guy. Can you take D'Lo and some picks and go get a guy like that? And then, like I said, bring back Schroeder and have like Schroeder, Chris Paul, and Reeves kind of be those 3 guys. I think that that's something that makes a lot of sense that could work. I love the idea of Chris Paul. I know a lot of people are really split on it, but I just think Chris Paul, his IQ, his playmaking ability, his leadership, the guy that's been there and done that. I love the idea of him kind of being that, again, that Rondo role. He's not going to be a $30 million a year guy on the Lakers. Like, that's something that I think people need to understand. Like, I see a lot of people that are like, nah, like Chris Paul, he's old, he's this, he's that. Like, and it's like, but you're not looking at the circumstances, right? You're looking at Chris Paul on the Phoenix Suns. You're looking at Chris Paul on like the Clippers. You're looking at Chris Paul on like the Houston Rockets. You're not taking into account that on the Lakers, he wouldn't be the 1 or 2 option. He wouldn't be playing 30 to 40 minutes a game like he had to in Phoenix and things like that. He wouldn't have as much of a load and burden of having to play make and take over games and do this and that, because you'd have a roster and you'd have guys like LeBron James and all that stuff. Like, what Chris Paul provides is like everything the Lakers need. You'd always have one of the highest IQ guys ever on the court. You'd have LeBron, and then when LeBron's not on the court, you could have Chris Paul, and you never lose that elite playmaking, ever. Like, that is valuable. There's no other team that has that. Like, that to that level, where you have a Hall of Fame point guard, arguably one of the best point guards in NBA history on the court, and then when he's getting rest, you have arguably the greatest player ever in history on the court. Like, that just almost never happens. And that would just be very valuable. Yes, of course, there are concerns. You know, there are still injury concerns and things like that, but you're not looking for Chris Paul to come in and be your best player. You're not asking for point guard Chris Paul. You're asking for a guy that can just kind of, again, play the Rondo role. And he led us to it, or helped lead us to an NBA championship. So I think Chris Paul could do the same. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think?